Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Led by Life. We're your host. I'm Rafaela, and this is Hannah. And we're two manifestors in human design. That's how Hannah and I met. That's where our friendship grew out of. Our shared love for the system of human design, the gene keys, and just all of the different layers that we've uncovered through our own experimentation with our charts, the human design system in itself. And we really just wanted to create a space to have deeper, more intimate conversations around what it's been like for the both of us, exploring the gene keys and going through our energetic constitution. So welcome. If this is your first time listening.
Okay.
Or welcome back if you've listened before. And today's episode, it will start with we're at Gene Key 13. So if you've been following us, we've gone every week for a period of time. We've gone through each gene key. We started at 1 and now we're at 13. And I actually have the 13th gate defined in my human design chart, and it's the gate of the listener that comes out of the identity center. And it's been interesting. I wouldn't say that I've worked specifically or have like built a relationship with this frequency, but I will say that it's just been so present in everything that I do. I think somebody once shared with me, like, there's so many different components of my chart that would stand out to say, like, oh, that's probably why you make such a great therapist. Um, and for anybody who doesn't know, that's what I do as a profession, full-time occupation pretty much, is that I'm a licensed therapist, mental health, emotional well-being therapist. And yeah, listening is a big part of my practice.
Yes, and I do not have this in my chart. Right. However, I have the 33, which makes up the channel. So it's interesting. And the 33 is the gate of privacy, which we can talk more about later. But I've heard it referred to as the energy of contemplation, which is interesting because I am quite a contemplator and
Mhm.
I am a meditation and mindfulness teacher as a profession and among other things. But it's interesting because I've been naturally kind of drawn to this, I suppose, art of contemplation, which is also what the Gene Keys is really invites of us, is to contemplate these different energies and these different ideas and concepts. So it's interesting. But Rafa, you mentioned when we were preparing for this episode, you mentioned something about this channel being sort of like the foundation of this podcast, or one of the things that really became a bit of a foundation for us creating this, initiating this together. Could you
Mhm.
share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I was reading um the channel, the 1333. So Hannah has the 33 defined, which is coming out of the throat center, and I have the 13th, which is coming up through the identity center. And so together they make a channel. And when I was reading about the channel, which is the channel of the prodigal, I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying that correctly, right? It was sort of describing this energy of being able to have this art of contemplation, of reflection, of past experiences, to be able to share then the wisdom and the learnings and teachings for the collective. And I thought, well, how interesting that Hannah and I pretty much have decided to create a podcast in which we're exploring the different energies, but sometimes what's kind of like funneling through is what we have gathered from our past experiences, um, to share like whatever wisdom we currently have, or whatever we've learned or gained so far with whatever energy we're talking about. And so it's like, it's interesting because this isn't the only channel you and I make up. We've talked about it before, how we also connect a circuit that connects our head center to our ajna center. And so I feel as if, amongst probably many other things that you and I could create together, it seems very fitting that one
Mm.
of the things we've started with is a space in which we take the time to kind of just like talk through what we've learned in life or what we've experienced, but then also kind of essentially apply it to each energy that we're like learning about, right? And part of our process is that we read it. We read the whatever information we have, that's out there on each energy center or each gate, and then we sit with it. And sometimes we sit with it longer than others, and um, and then we come together and we talk, and we just let out whatever really wants to be shared. Sometimes, like even today, we have little idea of like what's going to come through from this, but we trust the process of that.
Mm.
And that's why I think it's pretty much been like a foundation for us. Like, this is what we do. Right? We make up this frequency of taking the time to reflect on the past and then share it.
Yeah. And it's a projected channel. So
Yeah.
again, it's something that in a way was kind of invited out of us. And this is where we came up with the name Led by Life, where life is kind of leading us and guiding us towards what it is that we're here to share or to initiate as manifestors. And I remember feeling this like inner calling, this inner kind of invitation to create something together, which I'm learning is part of my process as a 2-5. They're both projected energies. And I've heard that the 2-5 can be called out from within. Like you get this kind of inner calling to create things and initiate things. So that's interesting. I'm still kind of learning how that looks to me. But yeah, I mean, we make up a lot of channels together, even just like some of the other gates that we have. I mean, we've already explored the 5 and the 15, which I have.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the 5, and we haven't yet gotten to the 16, but we've also got the channel 1648. So you've got the 48, I've got the 16. Like there's so many things that connect up together, which is really fun. Um, yeah. And a lot
Yeah.
of it is collective, and projected. So
Yes. And that's
yeah.
the other thing that I was that came to me. So there was two things that came to me also. You just reminded me, was one was how this is in like the collective sensing circuit. And to me, what that says is that it's something that is like more embodied and felt uh, for ourselves. But then because it's in the collective, like it's also something that is meant to be in relationship with others, or with the whole. And I mean, I don't know how much greater of a platform you can get than uh you know YouTube or the Spotify podcasts, where we launch both of these. But right, so in a way, that sort of was like, all right, that makes sense to share it in this way. And
Mm.
then the other thing was that I had remembered in some of the stuff I was reading was that it's a projected energy.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about our conversations around projected energy, and basically what I'm taking that into be is that you get called out, like you said. So whether it's you get called out by your network or people in your life, or your surroundings, or if it's within, you could also get like called out through life, um or through source. And I feel as if that's a little more subtle
Mm.
than when someone's telling you, what about this? Or what about this? Or we would love for you to do this. You'd be great at this, right? I think it takes a little bit more of like paying attention to. And I was thinking about how, like, for me, therapy has been something that essentially, like, people do come to you. Like, people usually search out therapists, like, when they're ready. And that's more of like when it's probably more aligned for them. As
Mm.
the same maybe for you, where I don't know, maybe you could share on that, of how you've experienced you being called out for
Mm.
things in life.
I mean, I'm just thinking of our profiles. Like, you've got the 2-4, I've got the 2-5. So for you, it's kind of about being called out, but with your network, or into um, being invited into things through people you know and through your network and community, which makes sense because I, in a way, called you out to do this with me. um,
True.
and I knew you through the network, right? Through the community we were a part of. And I felt that sort of inner calling, and it's not something that I can really put into words at this point. It's more just like a feeling of like, this would be really fun. Wouldn't this be a cool idea? And yeah, I'm not really sure, but if I look back on my life, I have been invited into a lot of different opportunities, and things just kind of seem to come out of nowhere sometimes. But when I trust the process and trust myself as well, and also trust my authority, like listening to what I feel like doing and what I want to do and what um, I suppose I'm excited to do, that can then help to discern, to figure out which invitations are the correct ones. I'm still exploring what that looks like. It's all kind of new. I mean, I've only been exploring and experimenting with my human design for 18 months. So it's all really new, but I'm starting to feel that like energetically how it feels,
Mm, yeah.
which I definitely felt with this podcast. Like, it was a feeling within that was like, huh, like I could see that you and I both share a lot of circuitry, or share a lot of different, together. When we come together, we share a lot of energy that works really nicely and has like this natural way it wants to come out. And then we are both really passionate and interested and curious about this information and this system. And then you had expressed that you wanted to start a podcast. So I kind of took that as an invitation, like, wouldn't it be fun to do this together? And I also want to find ways to share what I'm interested in and to share my insights and thoughts. And like, I don't have a connection from my head centers to my throat, but together we make up that connection. So I have this collective energy that wants to be shared, that is projected, but
Mm-hmm.
I have a split definition in my chart, which means that there's a gap between my different channels. So it wants to be made up. And I was reading about the definitions and like split definitions, and how there will be people that kind of naturally we're drawn to, because naturally they make up that circuit. And so I feel like that's what, again, has been happening with us. And then I just kind of felt that invitation, I suppose, like,
Yeah.
hey, let's do it. And it's not like me to normally, well, I don't know. Maybe that's not true. Maybe it is like me a bit to initiate things when I see that there's an opportunity. But it's not initiating in the sense of like I'm trying to force something. It's just like putting an idea out there and
Right.
seeing how the other person responds. Or yeah, does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. Because I do feel as if um it's like, so when I like, for me, my authority, right, is like honoring my heart's desires. And my strategy is like to inform and really to like sort of not control what I want to say, but just allow myself to speak. And in our like initial encounters together and towards the end of that human design circuitry workshop that Hannah and I took, I pretty much was, when I look back now and reflect on it, essentially I was informing. I mean, I didn't know who or what I was informing. I just knew that I was speaking out loud of the things that I want. And when I actually reflect back on all of the things in my life that have come to be manifested, like I have vocalized them, or I have talked it out over and over and over again, or I've even journaled it out and over again, or I've made the list of things that I truly desire and that I want for myself. And so maybe I didn't realize this, but in a way, I was informing. And
Mm.
what the 13th needs is to, without the 33, is to kind of be called out to reflect and share on what it's gathered from uh from stories and from, life or experiences or whatever. And so, you know there it is. It's just sort of like it's orchestrated in some way to create this, and I think it's really great. So it's interesting to kind of even reflect back on it now and
Mm.
see it operate.
It makes me want to go back and watch the recordings again from that workshop, and just like observe Rafa and Hannah 12 months ago, observe
Almost, just
what
about
we were.
almost a year.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting, like it's the design of a witness. So it'd be interesting to go back and observe and witness where we
Right.
were at then, and just how much growth has happened as well. I
Yeah.
think this is about like, well, like what came to me before is it feels very wise. It feels very like the gate of the listener feels like a very wise kind of energy, just like taking it all in, listening to things, and then knowing what, with the channel, knowing what's then meant to be shared in order to like serve the collective, serve humanity. So it feels very wise. And
Mm.
I'm curious, do you know what line it's in? Do you know what line you have it in? Actually, I can
No,
find out.
and that I'll let you look that up, because that's actually something that when I was um reading over some of the description of gate 13, I was like, oh, I want to know like what archetype it has for me, because what line is it in? Um because professionally, what I do is I'm a therapist. So I and it's so interesting every time I say that, because lately, more and more in the last couple of years, when I say I'm a therapist, people are like, what kind? When I was in like school, everybody like, in my opinion, in my experience, like if you were to say therapy, like automatically it was like, oh, okay, so like you listen to people's problems all day, or right, whatever was expressed or said. But now it seems like there's so many different um occupations that provide a therapeutic component. And now every time I say like, oh, I'm a therapist, people are like, oh, what kind? And I'm
Mm,
not used to that. And I actually don't really like the term um like mental health therapist, because for me it just kind of insinuates that like it's all mental.
mm.
And I wish there was a better way of that's why, again, these are just words and they're just labels and terms, but um yeah, I don't know if anybody has a suggestion of what to call licensed mental health therapist, because it's not just mental, it's so emotional, and it can be physical, and it's just like it can be spiritual, it can be, you know, all different types of our facets of our life. So to say mental health therapist, I don't know, I'm just going on a little tangent right now, honestly.
No, I think it's really interesting that point you make because, in a way, we're calling like the term mental health implies that it is in the mind and it is mental, and perhaps that's where so many people struggle with mental health because they are overly identified with the mental aspect and the stories and maybe even the labels that we give these different things, uh, that it is in a way distracting us from other ways to look at it, the emotional lens, the spiritual lens. I don't know. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's an important point to make. I'm not a mental health professional, but um, yeah, like we are so identified with the mind.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, but for all purposes, I think everyone understands what I'm saying, what I
Yeah.
do, right? And as far as this gate, I feel like when they say that you have something to find, it's something that you are really here to share out with the world. From my understanding, like the gift and the energies of that gate are more consistent in your life, and they are things for you to share, gifts for you to share with the world. And I will say that for sure, I feel as if like nobody's really had to teach me how to listen.
Mm,
I feel like and sometimes I'm even like nosy listening. Like I just thought about this, how um if we have a lot of like people around, or like there's a family gathering, or even if I'm just like in a setting with a lot of people, and something and like I'm having a conversation with someone, I can find myself like listening to the conversation that is around me. And not that I like not paying attention to the person in front of me. And, I can get kind of naturally distracted when there's lots of things going on. But I'll find myself being like, it's like my ears are like satellites sometimes, because
yeah.
I can literally feel like I'm drawing to, like I'm going to whatever is happening like around, or whatever conversation I pick up on. And I can't, like, sometimes I'll have to be like to the person, um, I'll have to tell them, I'm sorry, like I was totally into like something else. Like, can you say what you're saying again? Or they'll notice that I'm looking at them, but I have to say, I'm sorry. Like I have to pause for a second, because I can really just, I'm hearing this over here, and I have to bring it back because I can
Mm,
hear it so clearly. But it's so funny because this morning or last night, Probably both. It seems like the last day or so, Travis will speak, and I said, I've been saying what, like almost like I can't hear him, but
Mm.
I think he mumbles. He like brings all of his words into one, and so this morning he's like slowed it down. I'm like, I just can't understand what you're saying, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah. It feels like a very curious energy. Like you just want to hear what's going on
Well,
and
I do.
stories and
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's very much what it's about. It's like it was saying how people with, this gate 13, it says with its gifts for hearing, seeing, and storing secrets. So it's like people have this quality about them that others will just tell them,
Mm,
their truest secrets or their truest truths, or their stories. And I mean, it's yes, I can obviously really relate to this energy, and I find it really fascinating. Like I really do. And I listen to people's stories all day long. And I kind of do feel like it's this vault that's being
mm,
created right now, especially with going back into um, working in a setting where there's more people. And I'm working with more individuals than I was previously. So sometimes at the end of the day, I'll just feel like there's this, yeah, like internally, I feel like there's this vault, and that
mm.
all of these stories are just going in there. And at some point, at some time, something about something is going to want to be shared and expressed. That's how I feel lately. I feel like there's just, yeah, what's going in this.
It's like um yeah, it's like it's all just kind of simmering away, waiting to be shared and yeah. And people seem to kind of naturally open up to you, right? Like people will naturally just share things with you.
Yeah, but I will say, you know how sometimes there'll be people, I don't know if you've ever come across this, where they'll say that they're just like in the grocery store or
Mm,
something, and people will just talk to them and then they'll just tell them things.
mm,
That's not like my experience.
right. Yeah.
And I think that comes in, like, you add the layer of having like a manifestor aura. I
Yeah.
think
I was
that's what it,
about.
yeah,
Yeah.
you knew it.
Yeah.
Like people don't just come up to me and just tell me anything, right?
Mm,
Like, and I think that's you add in where like the projected layer comes in, because essentially what I'll do is I'll initiate that I'm doing something, you know, um, basically offer, like having availability to offer services, or right now I'm employed with a new job. So like essentially that's probably part of that. Um, but then this projected energy of people coming to you
mm,
for that service.
mm.
Whereas like when I'm just walking down the road, like no, people aren't gonna stop me. That does not happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? The
Yeah.
different layers. And I'm just, again, thinking of your profile, like it's probably more so within people who are already connected with you, where there's that like safety to open up, people who know you or through your work because there's already that
Yeah.
sense of like community or yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think so. Um, so where are we? Like, so the gene key 13, um, at its shadow being discord.
What does that
And
mean to you?
I was just about to say, like, for me, I feel like discord is like almost like disagreement.
Mm.
But now I'm thinking about Discord, the app,
Yeah, me too. Like
and I'm
the
thinking how people just
app.
communicate.
I'm thinking of like noise, like a lot of noise, but it's not really like anything that's being listened to or valued. Does that make sense? I don't know.
I get the noise part, yeah.
Yeah. What's the definition of discord?
The Webster definition.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up.
Um,
Disagreement between people. In music, it's a lack of harmony between notes, or it's disagreeing with people. Yeah, okay. Lack of harmony, disagreement. Well, I'm thinking of the
mm,
shadows, the repressive and the narrow-minded really stood out to me. The narrow-minded, reactive shadow. And it just made me think of these people who just argue with everything, who are just like finding disagreements everywhere.
and it's interesting because like everybody goes through all the layers, right? So you just reminded me when I was like reflecting on the shadow and the repressive nature and the reactive nature, this narrow-mindedness. I was thinking to myself, like, how does narrow-mindedness actually show up in my life? How do when are the times that I um yeah, maybe like closed off to seeing or experiencing another perspective? And I would say probably in my relationship, it comes up the most.
Mm-hmm.
That's the quickest one I can think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share on that or no?
No, I'm just I don't really have any examples.
Mm,
But that's the first thing that like comes up when I'm thinking of like narrow-mindedness. And where would it show up in my life is probably my relationship.
mm.
Yeah.
And what about the gift of discernment? What does that mean to you?
Well, I think of like to discern. Um, and I feel like it's being able to have this quality of being aware and sensing what what's correct for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if we think of it from like this idea of listening, the gate of the listener, so it's like taking in all of these stories, all of these lessons, all of these experiences, and then from there, discerning the truth for you, I suppose.
Or what's going to be of most value
Mm,
to what's going to be what's going to be of most value. Like one part about the 13th is also that it does speak, but it speaks precisely at the time that is you know perfect for that moment, or how it's
mm,
going to impact the most people on a
mm,
really helpful level or whatever. And I think that that's part of, for me, part of listening is to then be able to discern through what is being shared, to have this response that's going to be purposeful and impactful and
Mm,
supportive. Yeah.
mm,
So I mean, like, I think that's where, like, now as I'm talking it out loud, like, for me to truly be listening to somebody, it it requires a whole body experience. And I think that that's why it's in the sensing circuit.
mm.
And I think the Gene Keys even said that, like, you're not just listening with your ears. Because if you're just listening with your ears, like, you're just hearing. And
Yes.
the gift of listening isn't that. It's really being so present with all of your being to what's happening, across from you.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I
Which
agree.
I think would then take you to the city of empathy.
Mm.
I mean, I think people who are, you know, I think great listeners can have a quality of empathy.
Yeah, and I liked how he discerned the difference between sympathy and empathy.
Yeah.
How Richard Rudd in this chapter talked about sympathy being to feel with someone and empathy to feel within. So it's like this idea of, and it's again not really something you can put into words, but it's just like this connection to the whole, like feeling something that we all feel. Um, mm, it's hard to explain. It's like all of the cities. It's hard to put into
Yeah.
words. It's just, it's like really putting yourself in someone else's shoes and being able to feel what someone else is
Right.
feeling, because you can feel that on some level for yourself within
Yeah.
yourself, because
Yeah.
we're all so connected. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's when when you're moved when you're moved by somebody else's experience.
Mm,
Like, when two things came up for me that will happen is, like, when I'll feel the anger with somebody of what they're angry about,
mm,
or sometimes, you know, this, like, sadness. And I think that empathy at that level, when you can feel it, is because on some level, maybe not with the same detail, you have been in their shoes.
mm,
Like, and so your ability to be there and feel what they're feeling is because you're not closed off from your own feeling of what that was like for you.
mm. And I think he talks about it being like encoded within our genes, because it's like this memory of all of the human experiences that we've all been through that are encoded in our genes. I don't know exactly where he talks about that, but I just kind of, I mean, I highlighted here in the, this is before the city, but in the gift section, every character within the myths is an aspect of the world's psyche, and every circumstance they pass through is part of our own genetic and spiritual evolution. Those with discernment know in their bellies that this phase of our history must and will lead to a transcendent leap in consciousness. So I don't know if that really explained it, but yeah, it's like this connection that we all
Mhm.
have as a human race.
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, because if you think about it, like, what is it? The 64 ways of life. or of being. That I don't know where I'm seeing that, but right. So if we're looking at the human design system, the gene keys, everybody embodies all of these energies. Whether it's consistent for you or not is different, but essentially, like, we've all had our own experience with all of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, in some way it might not be an exact replica of what you've experienced when you're listening to somebody and hearing their story, but I'm pretty sure everybody can relate to a feeling.
Yeah, and when I think of empathy, I don't think of trying to like fix the problem or trying to solve things for someone. It's just like being with that experience, being really present with it.
Yeah.
Which I think, again, is like what you do so beautifully in your work, is just this ability to listen to people and to see people and to like feel with them or within them that feeling or whatever it is that they're going through or experiencing. And you're not fixing it for them, but you're just like holding this space. It's like a space holder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that empathy, and I feel like I even read that.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, in the Chinky. Yeah, something about maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. But I feel like if not, it should be in there because it does feel like empathy is a space holder. Yeah. And it's I keep going back to this part of how you and I make up this channel. And one of the things that it says is also that, like, without the 33, like, all of these stories could go unshared. And I think that's also why I've really enjoyed creating this, because you have a really great way of asking questions for like more reflection of, what was that experience like? Or sometimes you'll just say, do you have anything more you want to share on that? And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But yeah, I think it's cool when you can find little pockets in your life where you can activate these gifts or activate these energies. I feel like the white, as we talked about, like, is the undefined. So you like go on a journey to figure out what that's like. But it's fun when your gifts are sort of like either called out or have an opportunity to be expressed or shined or shared or whatever it is. I feel like that's really fun.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm learning a lot from you about listening. I'm learning a lot from you about waiting, being patient. I mean, this also feels like a very patient energy. And I know that that's a big part of your chart, with the 5th being your sun personality sun gate. So I feel like this is just another kind of layer of your essence that we get to experience. And you're right, I do enjoy like kind of asking these questions and having an outlet. It feels like it's an outlet to share these different things. And it's interesting, when I was reading about when I was reading about the full channel and the 2 gates that make up the channel, and the 33 is called the gate of privacy. And when I read that, I was like, that doesn't really resonate for me, because I don't feel like I'm a very private person. I feel like I am very open with what I share, and I'm not really someone who kind of keeps a lot of things close to myself. You know, I kind of am very open with sharing different experiences, and I'm sure that that's other parts of my chart as well that are playing into that. But when I read on, I realized that the privacy is this need for alone time. And so it really is creating this space to contemplate and to reflect and
Mhm.
to be alone so that you can kind of reflect on these different things, which that definitely resonates for me. I mean, I definitely need a lot of alone time as a manifester. I need a lot of alone time as a 2-5, as a hermit. I need a lot of alone time with having my 2 head centers defined, like going through this kind of conceptualization and process of ideation. So it's just interesting how, like, these things, as you dive into it, and sometimes the title or sometimes the label that it's given might at a glance not seem like it resonates, but as you go a
Mhm.
bit into the different energetics, it's like, okay, I can see how the privacy is not necessarily about the fact that I, you know, am private with
Right.
the information that I share. It's just like this need for alone time to reflect in order to, like, then know what is
Yeah.
of value to share. And particularly when we team up, I mean, that's where it can come out in such a beautiful way.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I totally feel um, like for me, I guess, we'll probably talk more on it when we get to the 33rd gate. But for me, definitely been a lot. Maybe I wonder for you if you have felt more consistent in like always knowing that you've needed alone time. I don't know. But for me, I just have learned about alone time, how beneficial it is and how supportive it is for me in the last 3 years. Um, I've always had uh, a lot of like my reflecting has always been like an internal private process. Like I'm just thinking about journaling for me. Like I've been journaling since high school.
Mm,
And that to me feels like it's maybe related a lot to the gate 33. Um, but to go with what you were saying, I feel like I've recently learned that, okay, yes, that's private, but now this layer of like private meaning alone, that to me is like really new.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And I
think
can,
you go ahead.
well, I was going to say, and I can sense because, right, like I can sense now when I feel like I'm not necessarily ready to share on something yet. Like, and I've been thinking about this, and I know we talked a little bit about it in our last episode about like my move to San Diego and how it's been going. And I think I even shared like a really small blurb on like my Instagram of just it being a little bit challenging, but going through it or whatever. It was really small. Like there wasn't a lot that I said. And it's like I had this desire to want to share, but I feel like I'm not through it yet. Like I'm not through the process. And so it's like I've been realizing this lately. It's like I can't make sense of it because I haven't yet completed the cycle of whatever this is right now. Like I don't have I mean I know how it's been, and to my like close friends and family when they ask, I can describe it a little bit more in detail, but I don't know what the wisdom or the sharing or the lesson of it all is yet. I just
Mm.
know how it's been and how it's feeling.
Yeah, it just speaks to this idea of, like, writing out the cycles and the seasons, and um, we will know when the right time to share is. And
Yeah.
once you had, I mean, we have to go through and be in the experience before we can fully learn the lesson.
Right. Right. Um, so yeah.
Mm.
Do you
I
remember
think
what you were going to say?
I think that's something beautiful that this channel teaches us, right? Yeah.
Mm.
I can't remember. No, I can't remember.
Um, I did find what line it's in, and it's in line 1. And,
Mm.
in the human design book, the line 1 has the archetype of empathy.
So what does have you read it?
No,
I just clicked to the page. Would you like me to read it?
you flipped straight to it.
Yeah.
Ooh, wow. Then I guess it needs to be read.
You want
It
me to
needs to be
read
shared. Yeah,
it?
share it.
Okay. Line 1, empathy. The ability to relate and commune with everyone with equanimity. Equanimity? Equanimity.
Equanimity. Hmm.
Harmony. So the higher expression is harmony through affection, a role of openness in listening to others with affection. And then the lower expression is the politician kissing babies, an openness that is never free of motives. Ah, okay.
Uh,
An
yeah.
ulterior.
Oh my gosh, how funny. Because if you guys want to know like a true thing of mine that I've realized lately is that sometimes I'll cry with a motive.
Mm,
And I don't know if it's like an attention seeking motive or if there's something else behind it. But I've realized this lately where um sometimes I'll notice that there's a layer of my crying that's like needing attention or something. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, and I think we all do that in a way. Like there's often some sort of a ulterior motive. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just like recognizing and being like, huh.
Hmm. Well, because I'm a crier. Like I'm a big crier. Like
Yeah.
especially lately. I'm crying all the time. But I've become more aware of it lately where I'm like, why are you crying? Like,
Mm,
I mean, I'm not invalidating my tears,
mm,
but I can also realize, like, like like when a child sometimes is crying and like they're whining and like it's not sometimes it's not really about anything. Like in a way, I mean, it's just what kids do, which is fine.
mm,
Um, like they're crying, but there's no tears coming out, kind of thing. It's one of those where it's like I've just been more aware of it lately when I'm crying, but like when I become aware of the fact that I'm crying and it doesn't seem like, not that it's not needed, but just that it's just this weird tendency, this weird behavior, it stops.
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm not even even sad.
Yeah.
I just want my way, or I want to prove my point or something, and maybe that's where it comes into discord.
Mm, yeah. Explain that.
Yeah. Like I just want to be right.
Mm,
I want to be right, and I want my point to to be the right one. Like, and that's it.
yeah.
And and I'll get like defensive or upset that it's not seen my way. And then I'll make this huge story out of it in my head and I'll cry. And then when I like take a step back, I'm like, okay, yeah, like I'm just saying this because it literally happened last night. And and that's what happened. I got offended, and then I got mad at the response that I got, and I got offended by it, and then I made it mean this whole thing, and I allowed myself to just honestly like journal out what I was feeling, and then it allowed me to take a little bit of a step back and realize like, okay, well, it doesn't have to mean that. And then I
Yeah.
ended up doing the thing that got me upset that someone said they weren't going to do. It's cooking dinner, by the way. So this story even gets even more funny. I don't know what to describe it, but I have a real thing with cooking, and
Mm,
some people will understand and other people may not. But I genuinely, it's like when I don't ever want to cook, ever.
mm,
That's not my thing. I don't want to cook. And, and at the same time, I realized like I need to learn how to provide myself with nutrition to sustain my day.
mm.
And basically, Travis wasn't in the mood to cook. And I was like, and he just responded with like, just such a like, no, like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I got so upset, and all this stuff went on in my head. And I just was like, I turned into a child. And I had to take a step back, and I was like, you know what? I can see how that is not something that somebody would want to do right now. And I'm a grown ass adult.
Mm,
Like, I can do this for myself right now because it will set me up for tomorrow. And I need to make sure that I have food. Like, I also have an active brain. You know, my arrow for my brain turns to the direction in which it's active, not passive. So, like, essentially, my brain is constantly working. And I think you have an active brain too, right? Yeah. So,
yeah.
like, I have to, one of the ways I get like fueled is by eating.
Yeah.
And, when you're listening to people all day with your whole body, if you're
Yeah.
not supporting yourself to sustain that much of energy exchange, like, you'll just be wiped. Like, I got home and I immediately had to eat today before we got on here because I would have, my gosh, I think I would have fallen over already. But anyway, that's a real life example for everybody to hear of like maybe what it's like going through discord and listening and empathy. I mean, I could really see where this person was at in their
Yeah.
response and what's going on with them. And it really allowed me to take a step back and be like, okay, you know,
Mm,
you can do this. It's gonna be okay for you to do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I find it so funny that your environment is kitchens, but you hate cooking.
I know. I know.
Ah,
I-
funny.
yeah, it is. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thank Thank you for sharing.
yeah, absolutely. Can listen to me anytime. Well, I think that's all for Gene Key 13, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It will be coming up on 14 the next time. So um if anybody relates or has this energy, this gift, share it with us, on our YouTube or on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. And so until next time.
Take care.